Talking about financing and innovative financing for that matter, let's turn our eyes to our homes or houses, real estate. If you don't have a place where you lay your heads, I'm sure you won't be as composed as you are. I know I would not be. So now let's find out what's going on in that space. We don't need to say that, emphasize it. The issue of insufficient housing stares us in the face everywhere we turn. And these days, with prices skyrocketing, inflation hitting everything, I've heard a lot of renters talking about how their rents have increased. But let's find out the innovative financing going on in that industry. That's the real estate industry. And joining us for that is Mr. Ayo Olanrewaju Kuyebi, is a managing director, chief executive officer of GMH Luxury, joins us virtually from Lagos. Thank you so much, Mr. Kirby, for your time this morning.
Good morning. I'm grateful for you.
So do we have, do we have any innovation, something new when it comes to financing in the real estate? We've seen mortgage. We don't know how popular or accessible it is when you talk about Nigeria, but take us through some of the innovations that have happened in the area of financing models in the real estate industry.
Okay. So basically, I think Nigeria as a country, we are still lagging behind when it comes to innovative financing of real estate, and it's one of the inherent challenges as far as housing deficit is concerned in this country. And that is why for every 1,000 Nigeria, it's only 23 out of that own a house. And that's when you compare that with what South Africa and Kenya is doing. You have 690 out of 1,000 South African owning a decent accommodation, and 750 out of 1,000 for Kenyan citizens. The Nigeria housing deficit, the government still needs to come and play a bigger role here. As at 1991, the Nigeria housing deficit is put at 7 million. And in 2007, that rose from 7 million to 12 million housing unit deficit. In 2010, it became about 14 million. And today, we are looking at 22 to 28 million. That means something is actually fundamentally wrong as far as real estate is concerned in this country. And if you look at this, there is no way, if we continue on this trend, we'll be able to bridge that housing deficit gap. So, so how can we come out of this current situation? In 2018, the value to turn around our housing deficit was put at 21 trillion as of 2018. That means today is times 4 of that figure. And, the government under FMBN, the Family Home Fund, and the National Housing Program, in 8 years, they were only able to deliver about 23,000 housing units. That's just a drop in an ocean, if you ask me. And year in, year out, as of today, before now, year in, year out, we deliver about 100,000 units year in, year out. But as of today, it's less than 10,000. And what does that tell you? Real estate is just it's beyond the brick and mortar. It's more finance, and there is nothing innovative as of today as far as real estate financing is concerned. Yes, there were a bit of improvement. FBN has done a market to capitalization from 2.5 billion to 500 billion. But if you look at the need and where FMBN is still very far. If you increase their single obligor from 15 million per individual to 50 million, it's also a progress. Now, the real estate companies can actually approach the money and the debt market to raise finance if they have investment grade rating. That's also a step in the right direction. But even the funds that are available, are they suitable for real estate?
What do you mean, are they suitable for real estate? What do you mean by that?
So what I meant by that is the fact that the easiest and the quickest fund you can annex, if you have an investment grade rating as a real estate company, is what they call is the issuance of CP, commercial papers, and that is just 270 days. What can you do within the space of 270 days to pay back? The turnaround time for a commercial paper is 270 days. And now, as a result of what is happening in the economy, the naira devaluation, the inflation, the low purchasing power, the low purchasing power has actually drastically reduced the patronage of the real estate sector, and that has actually made a lot of real estate sector to default, even in their obligation to the banks and to the commercial in the financial space, and that makes the access to suitable finance even more difficult as of this time because of the series of default that has been experienced by the players in this industry. So for me, what I think is actually suitable is to look at what Indonesia is able to do differently in terms of housing, in terms of in terms of solving the problem of their housing deficit. In 2019, one-fifth of total population of Indonesia, they live in slum. And what did the government do differently? They actually put a plan in place to deliver over 1 million housing units, affordable housing units, year in, year out. And, if you look at what they were able to do, they were in 2015, they were able to deliver close to 700,000 in just 1 year. And in 8 years of a government, of this past administration that promised 1 million housing units year in, year out, they were only able to do 23,000 in that space of that year.
All right,
Whereas a
Mr.
company like
Kirby,
a
let me
country,
let me just draw your attention to something you said. You brought about the example of Indonesia and how they were able to provide affordable housing, and we know back here we heard a lot of policies, pronouncement, and even the houses that a government has gotten into, and they call it affordable housing. But I guess the definition of affordable is what we should also look at, because I've also had to challenge some people who are in the build industry about the issue of affordability. And they tell you, well, the building materials are not cheap, so how do you expect the house to be cheap? Because if you're looking at affordable for an average Nigerian, I mean, the price is obviously not what is being put out there for what the houses that are called affordable.
Okay. So to make housing affordable, I think so. Still talking about what Indonesia do differently. What they did is to set out about over 1.5 billion dollars to cushion the effect of housing deficit, and part of this goes directly into construction by their development unit, and as well as providing a subsidized loan to the private sector. So when you do that, so let's compare that to what is actually happening in Nigeria at the moment. For you to be able to have an access to finance now in Nigeria, you are looking at 28%. How can housing be affordable? It can never be 28% loan per annum. You are looking at increase in development permit year in, year out by even the Lagos state. How can housing be cheap? I remember an approval we did in 2020 compared to the same cost of approval this year is over times 500%. How can housing be affordable? When you look at what Naira is 2 years ago to dollar and what Naira is to dollar today, how can housing ever be affordable if government is not really paying attention to this sector? And it's a proven fact that the prosperity and the health of any economy is judged by the performance of its housing sector. And it's also a fact that a man is never a man until he's able to own a house. And you have just 23 Nigerians owning a house out of every 1,000 Nigeria. So it shows that housing is not affordable. And except government is able to do their bit, housing will continue not to be affordable, and the gap of our housing deficit will continue to widen. So, what can actually solve this problem is to put a policy that works in place.
Are you saying we don't have the policy, or is it the implementation of the policy?
Nigeria has one of the robust policy when it comes to housing, but the implementation of those policies. And if our need to bridge the gap of housing deficit is, as of today, is over 40 trillion, how can FMBN, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, that's supposed to champion the affordable housing, will be capitalized at 500 billion? So what are we doing exactly? we cannot come out with all these parameters in place. We cannot come out and set these parameters in place. And the likes of the Bank of Industry, the CBN Intervention Fund, and all of that, they are channeled towards commercial building. And as of today, the deficit we are looking at is actually for residential purposes. And if you look at the deficit in question, the low income housing actually takes about 60-70% of that need. And even the housing that are provided today by the government, are they equally affordable?
All right, Mr. Kuyebi, I mean, just before we let you go, because we're almost out of time, yes. Some people will say and paint the scenario. For instance, if you stay in Lagos, I know you're in Lagos, so I mean, we can share this perspective. If you go to the island, you see huge buildings that are untouched, unused, and they belong to people. Some are even still being built, and by the time they are done being built, they are just left there. Obviously, if you get close to those buildings, the prices will scare you away. How can we find a balance? There are so many people who are homeless. The need for houses is, in trillions. And yes, you do have some of these buildings, that should be housing human beings, lying fallow and deteriorating.
So that is evident in the purchasing power of people, of us as a nation. And houses in those areas will continue to be very expensive and beyond the reach of common man. And the reason is not far-fetched. What is the travel time today between our suburban center to the urban center? From Agege to Ikoyi, what is the travel time? It keeps increasing year in, year out. If you have to move from Agege at peak period to Ikoyi or VI, you are looking at 2.5 hours in your hand. Governments are not being responsive. We move beyond being proactive now. We are talking about the responsiveness of government. What is the travel time between Ikorodu to VI? What is the travel time between Badagry to CMS? So those are areas where land is relatively cheap. But what is the connection between these places and the urban centers? So that is why the urban centers will continue to be crowded, and the property value will continue to soar beyond the reach of common man. So government need to step in by providing infrastructure facility, by enhancing transportation system that can move people from point A to point B without wasting a lot of productive time in so-called man-made our self-inflicted traffic. Because I believe the traffic we are currently facing in Lagos, moving from the suburban to the urban centers, is actually self-inflicted. And it's because government is not doing enough in terms of creating infrastructure facility to be able to support the population implosion. And this is being, we are moving from a very bad to a worse situation as far as infrastructure deficit and housing deficit is concerned as a nation. And I'm actually alarmed. And this is a sector that has a very huge potential to even turn the economy of this country around. We are talking about youth unemployment, great youth unemployment. The largest employer of labor today, apart from the government, is still this sector. And this sector, the engagement, the employment level is from this unskilled.
It was the agri sector. I thought it was the
value chain of construction.
I thought it was the agri sector, Mr. Kuyebi. Well, every industrial player is claiming that its sector is the largest
construction
employer of labor.
Sector actually. Maybe because more present agri sector is trying to catch up with the construction sector.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, actually.
Okay, all right.
It's this construction sector.
If you say so. Mr. Ayolarinwaju Kuyebi, the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of GMH Luxury. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
I'm grateful. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Yeah.